What would you do if you knew that Carl Jung found the exact blueprint of how introverted minds work, and that mastering this knowledge is the difference between living consciously or being controlled by unconscious patterns? Before we dive deep into this life-changing discovery, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. This information could literally transform how you understand your own mind, and I want to make sure you don't miss any of our content about psychological mastery. Carl Gustav Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and what he discovered about introverted thinking patterns will blow your mind. He identified that people with INFJ, INFP, INTJ, and INTP personalities possess a unique cognitive architecture that operates completely differently from the extroverted world around them. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. These personality types aren't just labels or categories. They're actual neurological patterns that determine how you process information, make decisions, and interact with reality itself. Jung discovered that introverted minds have what he called dominant introverted functions. For INFJs, it's introverted intuition. For INFPs, it's introverted feeling. For INTJs, it's also introverted intuition. And for INTPs, it's introverted thinking. These aren't just academic concepts. They're the actual operating systems of your consciousness. Think about this for a moment. Right now, as you're listening to these words, your mind is processing this information through one of these specific patterns. You're not just randomly thinking, you're thinking in a very particular way that Jung mapped out over a century ago. And if you don't understand how your specific pattern works, it will run your life without your conscious awareness. Let me explain what this actually means for your daily existence. When you have an introverted dominant function, your mind naturally turns inward to process information. You don't just react to external stimuli like extroverted types do. Instead, you filter everything through your internal framework first. This gives you incredible depth and insight, but it also creates a unique set of challenges that Jung identified. For INFJs with dominant introverted intuition, your mind is constantly synthesizing patterns and possibilities that others can't see. You're living in a world of potential futures and hidden connections. But Jung warned that if you don't learn to master this function, you'll become trapped in endless loops of overthinking and analysis paralysis. Your gift becomes your prison. INFPs with dominant introverted feeling experience the world through a deeply personal value system. Every decision, every interaction, every experience gets filtered through your internal emotional compass. Jung recognized that this creates profound authenticity and empathy, but also intense internal conflict when the external world doesn't align with your values. Without mastery, you become overwhelmed by the emotional weight of existence. INTJs share the same dominant function as INFJs, but they use it differently. Your introverted intuition focuses on systematic understanding and long-term vision. You see the underlying structure of reality and how everything connects. Jung observed that this gives you incredible strategic thinking abilities, but it can also lead to isolation and frustration when others can't see what seems obvious to you. INTPs with dominant introverted thinking are constantly building internal models of how everything works. Your mind is like a sophisticated laboratory where you test ideas and theories against logical consistency. Jung noted that this creates brilliant analytical abilities, but it can also trap you in endless intellectual exploration without ever taking action in the real world. Now here's where Jung's insights become absolutely crucial for your psychological development. He discovered that each of these introverted types has what he called an inferior extroverted function. This is your psychological weak spot, your Achilles heel, the area where your unconscious patterns can completely take over your conscious mind. For INFJs and INTJs, the inferior function is extroverted sensing. This means you struggle with being present in the physical moment and dealing with immediate sensory reality. When you're stressed or overwhelmed, this function can hijack your consciousness and make you impulsive, indulgent, or completely disconnected from your body. For INFPs, the inferior function is extroverted thinking. You struggle with logical organization and systematic implementation of your ideas. Under stress, this can manifest as harsh self-criticism, perfectionism, or complete mental paralysis when you need to make practical decisions. For INTPs, the inferior function is extroverted feeling. You have difficulty navigating social dynamics and expressing emotions appropriately. When overwhelmed, this can lead to emotional outbursts, social withdrawal, or complete inability to connect with others on an emotional level. Jung's revolutionary insight was that psychological maturity for introverted types requires conscious integration of these inferior functions. You can't just live in your dominant function forever. You have to learn to develop your weak areas without letting them control you. But here's what most people get wrong about Jung's work. They think personality typing is about putting yourself in a box and accepting limitations. That's completely backwards. Jung created this system to show you exactly where your unconscious patterns are controlling you, so you can become conscious of them and develop mastery. Think about your own life right now. How many times have you felt like your mind was working against you? How often do you find yourself stuck in repetitive thought patterns that don't serve you? How frequently do you react to situations in ways that you later regret? These aren't character flaws or personal weaknesses. These are unconscious psychological patterns that Jung mapped out decades ago. The difference between someone who masters their mind and someone who is mastered by it comes down to consciousness. When you understand your dominant function, you can use it intentionally instead of being used by it. When you recognize your inferior function, you can develop it gradually instead of being ambushed by it during stressful moments. Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of becoming conscious of your unconscious patterns and integrating all aspects of your personality into a unified whole. For introverted types, this is especially challenging because your natural tendency is to retreat inward and avoid the external world where your inferior functions operate. But here's the beautiful thing about Jung's discovery. Once you understand how your specific cognitive pattern works, you can begin to work with it instead of against it. You can honor your introverted nature while still developing the extroverted skills you need to function effectively in the world. For INFJs, this means learning to trust your intuitive insights while also developing practical skills for implementing your visions in reality. You don't have to choose between your inner wisdom and outer effectiveness. You can have both. For INFPs, this means honoring your authentic values while also developing the logical thinking skills needed to organize your life and achieve your goals. Your emotional depth and your practical competence can work together. For INTJs, this means using your strategic vision while also learning to be present in the moment and connect with your physical experience. Your long-term thinking and your immediate awareness can complement each other. For INTPs, this means pursuing your intellectual interests while also developing emotional intelligence and social skills. Your analytical abilities and your relational capacities can enhance each other. Jung understood that this integration process isn't easy. It requires facing parts of yourself that you've been avoiding or suppressing. It means stepping outside your comfort zone and developing skills that don't come naturally. But this is exactly how you prevent your mind from mastering you. When you're unconscious of your patterns, they run automatically. When you become conscious of them, you gain choice. And choice is the foundation of psychological freedom. The question is, how do you actually begin this process of mastering your mind? Jung provided specific guidance for each introverted type, and understanding these principles can literally change the trajectory of your entire life. Let's start with the foundation that applies to all introverted types. Jung discovered that your dominant introverted function is both your greatest strength and your potential trap. It's like having a superpower that can either liberate you or imprison you, depending on how consciously you use it. For INFJs with dominant introverted intuition, your mind naturally sees patterns, connections, and future possibilities that others miss completely. This is an incredible gift, but Jung warned about what he called the intuitive trap. When you live entirely in the world of possibilities, you can become disconnected from present reality and practical action. The key to mastering your INFJ mind is learning what Jung called grounding. You need to develop your extroverted sensing function gradually and intentionally. This doesn't mean becoming a different person. It means learning to bring your intuitive insights into concrete reality. Start by paying attention to your physical environment for just 5 minutes each day. Notice colors, textures, sounds, and sensations without analyzing them. This trains your mind to be present instead of constantly projecting into future scenarios. When you feel overwhelmed by possibilities, engage your body through exercise, cooking, or any hands-on activity. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called active imagination for INFJs. Instead of being passive recipients of your intuitive insights, learn to dialogue with them consciously. When you have a strong intuitive feeling about something, don't just accept it or dismiss it. Explore it through writing, art, or meditation. Ask yourself what this insight is trying to tell you and how you can use it constructively. For INFPs with dominant introverted feeling, your challenge is different but equally important. Your mind processes everything through your personal value system, which creates incredible authenticity and emotional depth. But Jung observed that INFPs often struggle with what he called feeling overwhelm. When your emotions become too intense, your inferior thinking function can take over and create harsh self-criticism or analysis paralysis. The path to mastering your INFP mind involves developing what Jung called emotional regulation through thinking. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or becoming coldly logical. It means learning to think about your feelings instead of just experiencing them. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, pause and ask yourself specific questions. What exactly am I feeling right now? What triggered this emotion? What does this feeling tell me about my values? What action would honor both my emotions and my practical needs? This process helps you integrate your feeling and thinking functions instead of being dominated by either one. Jung also recommended that INFPs practice what he called value clarification. Write down your core values and examine them regularly. Are they truly yours, or did you absorb them from others? How can you live these values more fully in your daily life? This conscious engagement with your value system prevents it from operating unconsciously and creating internal conflict. For INTJs, your dominant introverted intuition focuses on systematic understanding and long-term vision. You naturally see how everything fits together and where things are heading. But Jung identified a specific trap for INTJs that he called visionary isolation. When you live entirely in your internal model of reality, you can become disconnected from immediate experience and other people's perspectives. Mastering your INTJ mind requires developing what Jung called present moment awareness. Your inferior extroverted sensing function needs gradual conscious development. This means learning to value immediate experience as much as future planning. Practice engaging with your environment without trying to analyze or improve it. Spend time in nature without thinking about anything. Engage in physical activities that require your full attention. When you feel frustrated with others who don't share your vision, remember that their different perspectives might contain valuable information that your intuition is missing. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called implementation discipline for INTJs. Your mind is brilliant at seeing possibilities and creating plans, but you need to develop systems for turning your visions into reality. Break your long-term goals into immediate, concrete actions. Create accountability structures that force you to engage with the practical world regularly. For INTPs with dominant introverted thinking, your mind is constantly building and refining internal models of how everything works. You love exploring ideas and understanding complex systems. But Jung warned about what he called the thinking trap. When you live entirely in the world of ideas, you can become paralyzed by endless analysis and disconnected from emotional reality and social connection. The key to mastering your INTP mind is developing what Jung called emotional integration. Your inferior extroverted feeling function needs conscious attention and gradual development. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally expressive overnight. It means learning to recognize and value emotions as important information. Start by paying attention to your emotional responses without trying to analyze them away. When you feel something, pause and acknowledge it before moving into thinking mode. Practice expressing your thoughts and feelings to others, even if it feels awkward at first. Join groups or activities that require social interaction and emotional engagement. Jung also recommended that INTPs practice what he called implementation commitment. Your mind loves exploring possibilities, but you need to develop the discipline to choose specific ideas and follow through with them. Set deadlines for your thinking processes. Force yourself to make decisions even when you don't have perfect information. Take action on your ideas before you've analyzed them to death. Now, here's something crucial that Jung discovered about all introverted types. Your psychological development isn't linear. You'll go through periods of growth and periods of regression. You'll have times when you feel like you're mastering your mind, and times when old patterns seem to take over completely. Jung called this the spiral nature of individuation. You're not trying to reach a final destination where you've permanently mastered your mind. You're engaging in an ongoing process of becoming more conscious and integrated throughout your entire life. The key is to approach this process with what Jung called compassionate awareness. Don't judge yourself harshly when you fall back into unconscious patterns. Instead, notice what happened, learn from it, and gently redirect your attention toward more conscious choices. Remember that your introverted nature is not something to overcome or fix. It's a legitimate and valuable way of processing reality. The goal isn't to become extroverted. The goal is to become a fully integrated person who can access both introverted and extroverted capacities when appropriate. Jung's final insight about mastering your mind is perhaps the most important. He discovered that psychological maturity requires what he called the transcendent function. This is your ability to hold opposites in creative tension without collapsing into either extreme. For introverted types, this means learning to honor both your inner world and your outer responsibilities. You don't have to choose between depth and practicality, between authenticity and effectiveness, between vision and action, between thinking and feeling. You can develop the capacity to access all of these qualities as the situation requires. This is what it truly means to master your mind before it masters you. You become the conscious director of your psychological processes instead of their unconscious victim. You use your personality type as a tool for understanding yourself, not as a prison that limits your possibilities. Your introverted mind is capable of incredible depth, insight, creativity, and wisdom, but these gifts can only be fully realized when you bring them into conscious relationship with the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding or suppressing. The journey of psychological mastery is challenging, but it's also the most rewarding adventure you can undertake. Every step toward greater consciousness is a step toward greater freedom. Every moment of self-awareness is a moment of liberation from unconscious patterns. Jung believed that conscious individuals have the power to transform not only their own lives, but also the collective consciousness of humanity. When you master your own mind, you become a force for healing and wisdom in the world. So I challenge you to begin this journey today. Start paying attention to your dominant function and how it operates in your daily life. Notice when your inferior function tries to take over during stressful moments. Practice developing the aspects of yourself that don't come naturally. Most importantly, remember that this is a lifelong process of growth and discovery. Be patient with yourself, stay curious about your inner world, and trust that every step toward consciousness is a step toward the life you're meant to live. What patterns have you noticed in your own mind that might be controlling you without your awareness? Share your insights in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more content about psychological mastery and personal transformation.